Okay, we are now live on YouTube, I believe.
Yep, it says now live.
Don't see the screen on YouTube, but
It says live at the top.
okay, there we go. All right, so here we go on Instagram. Well, okay. We're having some technical difficulties today.
On Instagram?
Yeah, it wouldn't let me go live. I'm going to try again. It could be the title. Sometimes that happens.
Really? It's that censored, huh?
It can be. Let's see. Let's try it without the title and see if it'll let us go. Okay. Something is not right. Close out the app and try again. How to spot a spiritual clit. That's a whole other show.
Stop it. Is that what it put?
Accidentally.
You should totally leave that one up.
That might be next week's episode. Okay.
We could riff on that too,
Yeah,
for sure.
Yes. Okay, try to get this lighting back. All right, now let's try this again. All right, now we're in action.
Okay, so I'm looking for your Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm. Welcome. This is Natasha Edwina for Goddess Vibrations, the Spiritual Sexual Empowerment Show. Today, I'm talking with Melissa Lapides, and we're going to be talking about how to spot a spiritual cult. I've been really excited for this topic. She's coming in any minute now, and we'll get started. So I really hope that you have some questions, some comments, be part of this discussion with us. All right.
So I just sent you the request to join on Instagram.
Yep, got it. Welcome. We made it. Okay, so turning the volume down all the way on our phones.
Got it.
Since we are simultaneously broadcasting on YouTube and want to let anybody that joins us here on Instagram know that if for any reason it ever cuts out, you can always join us live on YouTube. Natasha Edwina, link in bio also. My head, I think, is just going to be a little bit cut off in this one.
Yeah, mine is too on the Instagram. That's okay.
I just can't. Oh, there. That's a little bit better. I'm a little bit crooked, but that's right. All right. So here we are with Melissa. Melissa is a marriage and family therapist like myself. She does a lot of work with trauma. She has a trauma certification, and she's doing a lot of work with helping people to become trauma informed. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. And I'm really excited to talk to her about this because she is an expert on spiritual cults and sort of like these predatory, manipulative spiritual people who take advantage of folks. And I know last time we met, you were telling me that you're kind of like a magnet for these people. Like they seem to find you in every crowd or training or whatever else. And so I really just want to hear some of your stories. You can tell us some of the things to look out for, because obviously this is something that we're dealing with a lot more and more lately. Maybe we start there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely an epidemic. And I think it has been like for a long, long time. You hear of all these gurus and yoga teachers and priests and people that are doing abuse behind the scenes that are coming, in the name of God, in the name of love, in the name of healing. And yet they have this immense power, and they use that power to manipulate and to gain, their followers' trust by becoming this authority. And then as that authority, they are, telling people that there are things that need to be done that are to help them towards enlightenment or towards wherever they're going up the ladder, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the cult or in the spiritual circle or community. And it's deceptive and manipulative and abusive, and it's happening all over the place. So yeah, it's really important to look out for the red flags in these kind of communities. And I think that as newcomers, as people that are spiritually seeking or even like seeking personal development, whatever it is, when you are vulnerable, which you are when you're seeking these things like spirituality or personal development, personal growth, there is this part of you that also doesn't know what to look for, right? Because when we're seeking these things and we're seeking teachers, how do you know who's telling you what is, of integrity, what's not of integrity? And so it can be really tricky to be a seeker, to want to grow yourself spiritually, to want to grow yourself psychologically, right? Anybody that has that position into your psyche in some way or another has to be really carefully evaluated before you let them in. And so this is the kind of stuff that so many people don't know about when they start seeking or when they start their spiritual journey.
Well, it's kind of like spirituality is sort of an authority in some way, or it can be used as an authority because we're already sort of primed that way with religion, right? As being like this moral authority or the highest of high. And I'm seeing it even now at the election where certain people are like, well, if you vote for that candidate, then you're not spiritually evolved, or you don't see the truth, or, oh, it must be so sad for you to be in the dark, or those sorts of things being said online. And it's this idea that there's this one truth. And so if somebody's coming off as a spiritual leader and they have a decent following, or they have testimonials or whatever else, you're thinking, oh, well, that's the truth. And I think you can doubt some of your own intuition and some of your own feelings sometimes. And even like with Bikram, I watched that documentary. I don't know if you saw the documentary, but it was really sad because so many people had mixed feelings, because they really benefited from the classes and the teaching and the certification, and they really had a genuine affection for him. And then to learn of the things that he was doing, and also trying to make sense of that abusive side of his personality too, it's really hard. And it reminds me of and I'm sure obviously you're familiar with this as a therapist too, but like incestual families where your abuser is someone that you also love. And so how do you deal with those feelings? It's complex the healing from that.
It is super complex, and it is a
Mhm.
total mind fuck. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of times, if we really investigate the people that fall into these traps, they are the same people that had some kind of abuse happen in their family, right?
Mhm.
And so when we have that pattern, it's more likely that we fall into the same pattern. I know this is true for myself, right? I come from an abusive background, and I've fallen into the trap of many of these kind of leaders that weren't actually authentic. And it
Mhm.
is really confusing because a lot of them have amazing things to teach. But what I say is, you never have to tolerate abuse. So when somebody is doing abuse, it cancels out the good stuff, right?
Mhm.
Like it's like there you could have all of these amazing teachings without somebody that's also doing abuse. So moving on, supporting people like that can be really dangerous. And I get what it's like when somebody is abusive, but you also see the good qualities in them, and maybe they have helped you in so many ways. And like you said, it's the same thing with family of origin from any parent that's been abusive. The main symptom that comes out of that child is confusion, right? So it's
Mhm.
super confusing when you have a parent that's abusive, but also has done loving things for you. Well, it's the same thing with a cult leader, a spiritual teacher, a coach, whoever it is that has helped you in so many ways, but also is hurting you or other people that you know. And so you be grateful for the good times, and step away as fast as you can because we don't want to support people like this.
And it's not going to get better. It kind of reminds me of your post that you did earlier today. I can't remember the title of it, but you basically said, don't fall in love with the potential. Like, don't, don't be holding on to something because you're waiting for what that person is going to be. And, that seems so relevant right now as well. We can't just keep making excuses for people's behavior. It's like, no, that is abusive behavior. That is, you know, narcissistic behavior, whatever it is. And that's it. Like having no tolerance for that, because that's how they get their hooks in. And they really are experts. I feel like these predators, and especially with probably the spiritual ones, um, it's the same intuition almost that empaths have, where you really are very perceptive and can pick up on energy, but they're using it to exploit rather than heal. And sometimes it does feel like healing because they're not all bad all the time, and they need to get their supply.
Oh, 100%. And you have to think about it if you had a father that was abusing you and your mother stayed with him, like what would that do? You know what I mean? That would be promoting the abuse, right? And so
Hmm.
it's the same thing like in any kind of cult that's happening. Like you said with Bikram, it's like, people were so sad because they heard of this and couldn't make sense of it. Maybe they're like, no, I want to stay, but then you're actually promoting abuse if you
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
And so it can become a really confusing thing. I was watching did you see the documentary on Netflix? No, it was on Hulu about the mom who busted the Nexium cult.
Oh, I just started watching that this week. Happened to stumble across it after we chose this topic. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet though.
And I mean, they went like all the way down the road into like doing horrific acts to some of the people. And yet
Wow.
he still had the people that stood by his side, like knowing that these things were going on because they get so indoctrinated
Hmm.
with the beliefs of the cult and with the charisma of the teacher. It's like somehow, even though horrific acts are happening,
Hmm.
they make sense that it's in the name for good somehow.
Hmm. And so you said that people that have a history of abuse are more prone to these sorts of leaders. Are there any other things that would make someone more prone to being sucked into this, in your opinion?
Yeah, people that are confused, people that are insecure, people that don't really trust themselves. So that's anybody that has trauma. Anybody
Hmm.
that has unhealed trauma does not have a sense of self, right? Because when we have trauma, our sense of self becomes fractured. And so we've never had that mirroring from a healthy parent to develop a strong sense of self. Sorry, I'm like looking down at the phone and up at this.
Oh, you could just choose whichever camera you want to look at, and I'll meet you
I'm
there.
like, I'm noticing. So when we don't have that strong sense of self, when we have trauma that's unhealed,
Mhm,
we're going to seek out people that have definitive answers, right? Because it
mhm,
feels like a sense of safety, but
mhm,
it's a false sense of safety. So it's important to notice in yourself, whoever's watching this, where you do that, where you're like, oh my gosh, this person has the answer. This is the answer. Or if you're the kind of person that always asks for advice, like you probably have unhealed trauma. If you
mhm,
don't know what to do, a lot of times, if you're not sure of yourself,
mhm,
you become prone to leaders like this, to teachers
mhm,
like this, to groups like this that say they do have the answer.
mhm. Yeah, so it's just learning to trust yourself and uh, use all of your senses. I think really staying grounded too in logic.
100%. But when it's like when we have trauma, we can't learn to trust ourselves until we heal. That's the
Mhm,
biggest piece. And so even logic, like sometimes doesn't it the pull to wanna feel that sense of security
mhm,
overrides the logic in
mhm,
somebody that has unhealed trauma, and so it is important to use logic. However, when you're that person that is in
mhm,
that vulnerable position, I think oftentimes, like, they don't even give credit to logic, right? It's like
mhm,
they're going with what they want to feel, and what they want to feel is safe and loved, and like they're going to be healed, right? And so it's that part that wants it so bad that gives up the sense of logic in a way
mhm,
to go ahead and move forward with allowing these people to control you or tell you they have the answers.
mhm. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of that fight or flight, right? So anybody that has trauma has this low level fight or flight. So when you're looking for safety or you're looking to be loved, it's you wanting to soothe that fight or flight for the moment. And also, when I was a therapist working with teens who were in gangs and doing really high risk behaviors on the weekends, I realized that they would also go jump into high risk activities almost to get like a dopamine rush or to
Mhm.
adjust their neurotransmitters, because for so many years of being in fight or flight they started to experience depression then too. And so it's almost like they're in this addiction cycle of being almost needing that fight or flight to get them going, because their neurotransmitters are so low too. And so I can see how somebody who's very charismatic or who even starts to do something abusive, it doesn't maybe even register fully, because it's just giving you that shock response, that mini shock response to get your neurotransmitters going. And then, we can make parallels to the domestic violence cycle too, which is hurt you, then bring the flowers and apologize and the romance, and then it starts all over again.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, it's until somebody realizes, like, and sees the repeat of this pattern, they're not able to get out of it. It's like they're so deeply in it. And to be able to recognize it, that, wait a second, like maybe this isn't like what I thought it was. And then you're like, seeing red when everyone else around you is seeing green. And to be able to speak to that in a place where everybody else is completely indoctrinated, that's really hard. You start to really doubt yourself, even if you feel like essentially something is different. Oh, somebody's saying they can't
I can't
hear.
hear you. Thank you, Vicky
Oh
and Anne,
no.
for letting us know. Okay, why wouldn't we be able to hear you? Because maybe your headphones switch back? I don't think so, because then they would.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear?
I just
Can
put the
anyone hear?
volume up on
Okay,
the
she put the
phone.
volume up. Does that help at all? Can you all hear?
Can you guys hear now?
I feel like sometimes when we have these really charged, powerful conversations, that does knock out the energetic grid or something. This is not the first time this has happened. Okay, you can't hear.
No.
I would like to invite all of you, if you'd like, to join us on YouTube. We're also live streaming on YouTube. Natasha, Edwina, YouTube. Well, Vicky, the headphones are not connected to Instagram. Her headphones are connected to YouTube. So that's what's interesting. So the headphones shouldn't have anything to do with the volume going out, which is interesting that you could hear her before
that it's
and
not
now you
picking
can't.
up.
So it's got to be an issue with Instagram. So yeah, I'll put in the comments, come and find us on YouTube. Natasha, I'll put it in here for you. Edwina, YouTube, and you will be able to
Hear.
You'll be able to hear, and you'll see our live video, our live stream going. And I don't know if we should, I guess we could keep this going on Instagram and maybe the volume will come back because it doesn't hurt us to do that, right? Let's see here. This is the nice thing too about having the simultaneous stream, because inevitably there's some kind of tech issue that will happen. Right. Okay. So hopefully people that join will see there. And I can't really tell if folks are on here on YouTube. It says live chat should be visible. Okay, Vicky's there. Thank you, Vicky, for commenting. Okay, so I can see comments on YouTube. And if you all have questions or anything that you want to put in the chat box here, please do for us, and we're happy to answer. Also here on YouTube, we're not limited to the 60 minutes. So, okay, we'll just roll with it. Flexible. Okay. That's what we do. Cool. We're therapists.
Cool. Yeah.
we're supposed to be good at overcoming challenges, right? So what were you saying? You were saying that we were talking about the domestic violence cycle and how that low level fight or flight can, adjust the neurotransmitters, and the neurotransmitters can be charged up again by maybe a shock to the system or a act of abuse or an act of love bombing. Let's say that's a term that some people may or may not be familiar with. And so I just want to say, because I see some people are still joining. If you cannot hear Melissa, please join us on YouTube. I put the comment or the link in bio, and also Natasha Edwina on YouTube. You can Google it. Okay. So continue. What were you saying before we got interrupted?
I think I was saying like how, if you don't, I was saying if you're the person that starts to wake up from it, right? Mm-hmm. I'll never forget. I was at this training. It was like rapid trauma healing or something. It must have been like 8 years ago. And it was a whole bunch of therapists in the room. And this guy was literally convincing people that he was healing them. It was like this mind manipulation thing, right? And everyone was buying it. And I'm going like, this is not real. Like I'm watching him convince people, like say that they're healed or that they feel better, right? It was like all this mind stuff. And I'm like, I was too scared to say anything because I'm like, there's 50 people in this room and I must be the only person that's seeing this, right? Mm-hmm. And then this like 90-year-old lady behind me, she must have been a therapist for like 50 years, stands up and she goes, is everyone else drinking the fucking Kool-Aid here? And I was like, oh my God. I like turned around. I was like, thank God. She ended up being my therapist because she's like, how come you knew and you didn't speak up? And I was like, I doubted myself. And it's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing that happens in family of origin
Mm.
trauma, right? It's like if you're the child that's being abused or seeing the abuse, you don't want to say it because everybody else is playing along with the program. And then that makes you the bad one, right? And it's so
Mm-hmm.
scary to find your voice. And I've had to do this in a spiritual community before that I was part of, that all of a sudden I was like, this isn't right. There's things about this that are not right. I know this guy is saying he can't
Oh,
hear.
yeah. So go ahead and join us on YouTube. There's I posted a comment, Natasha Edwina. For some reason, Instagram is playing tricks on us and we cannot hear her. But we are on YouTube. So if you Google Natasha Edwina YouTube, or you can go into my link in bio, that'll take you to my YouTube channel and you'll see our live stream on YouTube. Come on over. The conversation's getting juicy. So yeah, so Melissa, you're saying that when you're the only one where all these other people are drinking the Kool-Aid, it's like it's super, it's scary. I feel like it's scary. I feel like I've been in that situation a few times as well, where I'm looking around like, oh man, they're all falling for it.
It's
And
super scary.
because if you're the person that says something, if you're the whistleblower, then you're going to get attacked too, because
Mhm.
they want to go with the manipulation, the game. It's fun or whatever, exhilarating. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. When I was calling out this spiritual community that I was part of, all of a sudden it was like my soul went dark. Like my soul went dark. These were negative entities talking through me. It wasn't really me. Like there was like all this manipulation. So everyone else believed that like I was the bad person here, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And that's the kind of stuff that they do. If you try to call one of these cults out, then all of a sudden you become the bad person. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of tactics that they will use to get everybody else on board. It's like bullying in school again, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you told on somebody that did something bad and now they all turn around and bully you, right?
Well,
And so go ahead.
and like with narcissists too, they call them flying monkeys. It's the people that support the manipulation of the narcissist for whatever reason. So
Mhm.
they're bought into that dysfunction, that predatory behavior.
Yeah, and they still want to be loved and accepted by the leader and the people that
Mm,
are high up in it. There's such a
mhm,
need, just like in a family of origin, there's such a need to be loved and accepted because you haven't built that internal system of love and acceptance that you're
mhm,
willing to negotiate, even if you see different, even if you believe different, you're willing to negotiate those parts of yourself so
mhm,
that you could be loved and accepted.
mhm. Right. So, what are some of the ways that you were able to tell immediately that somebody was just full of shit, basically, and manipulating
Yeah.
others?
So if the leader has all the information, like if they're the
Mhm,
one with all the information and they are the only ones that have the power to like give you that information or bring you up to a different level, right? Or enlighten you or whatever it
mhm.
is,
They're the
that's
Messiah.
totally.
Yeah.
That's sign number 1. Sign
Okay.
number 2 is a lack of validation from that person. Like, if you have a concern and they're not validating your concern, but you're wrong or bad or whatever it is, or they're just like, "Oh," like, brushing it off, that's huge. Like, if
Mhm.
somebody can't validate you, that's a huge sign that that's not a safe person.
Right. So kind of almost like gaslighting. Like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with you, or that's not. No, you're wrong about this
Mhm.
kind of thing. Hmm.
Mhm.
Which only
Yeah.
adds to that inner turmoil or confusion that you already have being a victim of trauma or past trauma.
Exactly. And
Hmm.
so it's really important to notice, right? If you do have past trauma, like how much are you willing to be indoctrinated into certain belief systems that are contained, right? Another sign is a lot of these cults will tell you everything that you've heard outside of here is not right. Like we know the way. Everything you've heard before, like get rid of it. It's garbage.
Hmm. Right. So Have you experienced some of these organizations in Southern California?
Not a spiritual cult, but I've seen it in the coaching industry out
Yeah.
here in California, where
Mm-hmm.
like these manipulative tactics are being used to have people buy into personal development or used for sales. And
Mm-hmm.
when you call out these kind of people, it's like you just get like blocked, deleted, exiled, whatever it is, because they know on some level. And a lot of these cults and personal development
Mm-hmm.
organizations, they are banking. Like they make massive amounts of money. So you're not just a threat to, their social circle, but you're a threat to the finances that they're bringing in through these manipulative tactics, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's when you're really in danger because you start to mess with somebody's finances or money and then they're going to terminate you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many of these things going on in California. I mean, this is the mecca of spirituality
Mm-hmm.
and cults, right?
Mm-hmm.
We hear so much about this stuff happening in California. And I think it's just because like, this it's progressive here and their spirituality has been around here for a long time, but there's also, this sense of it's a I don't want to say fake spirituality, but it's become a business. It's such a big business. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the business of spirituality, it's like, how can we use this with people that we know are vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
to create a massive amount of income for ourselves? It's like preying on that vulnerability. These people actually know that people coming for these services are vulnerable people. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's such a advantage for them, even though it's like horrible and horrific, to prey on people that are coming for, you know, to heal things like trauma, like abuse. And it's easy to get into those people and just recreate the same situation over again in a way that's in the name of love or God or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like a child molester is going to get a job as a teacher or a coach or a youth group leader, or they're going to go where their population is, where they're going to be able to access those that they're trying to exploit or put power over. And also, I know when I was working with San Diego Unified School District, we had trainings with the police department that would train the therapists in the school district about the child prostitution rings, the prostituted children, and how they would recruit children to be prostituted. And they said the age 9 was actually the highest dollar, which is really sad.
Mm.
Um, and San Diego being one of the hot spots because we're so close to the border. And they would really look for children that were in disruptive homes that were having a lot of conflict, runaways. And one thing, I mean, it was just heartbreaking to sit through that training. But the one thing that I realized right there in that moment, I think my daughter was only about maybe 2 or 3 at the time, but I was like, okay, never, ever will I ever kick her out of the house or not have a place for her to be safe and have a roof over her head, because that's what they're exploiting those family conflicts where the child's vulnerable and they're already in that teen angst or that preteen angst. And, even using young, cute boys to train them to pick these girls up at the mall and think that they're their boyfriend. And then all of a sudden the switcheroo happens one day and they send her to the pimp instead. And I had one of these clients that, just went to the mall one day and was basically kidnapped and was in a pimp's house for 3 months doing, God knows what. And the thing is with the child is you can keep reselling their body over and over again, whereas a
Mm.
drug just gets used once, right? So it's a really lucrative business, like you were talking about money for these predatory types, for gang members, for these prostitution rings. And so Yeah, she was going to school, but how the heck are you supposed to learn anything when you're processing unthinkable levels of fresh abuse and trauma and whatnot? So it's really just about bringing back that sense of reality. And I feel like under extreme stress, and I would even say everybody's vulnerable to this right now because there's so many multiple layers of stress going on through this pandemic. Everybody's vulnerable to being manipulated. Everybody's vulnerable to going into a partly dissociated state of going into this magical thinking, and staying grounded is really, really important right now. And there's gaslighting going on even throughout this thing. There's so many different narratives and things, and it's like somebody's lying because you're hearing all kinds of different stuff.
Yeah, it's horrible. And it is a time to be extra aware right now because, like you're saying, whenever we're in the unknown, people want to
Mhm,
grasp on to definitives, right? It's like
mhm,
they're so scared to be in that place of the unknown. And we are really in unknown, uncharted territory right now
mhm,
as a country, as a society, as a community. And so people look to definitive answers in
mhm.
these times. And so this is when, spiritual teachers and people like that can really
Oh,
see
maximize, yeah,
opportunity.
just
Yeah.
like that child that's been thrown out of the house or whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. And so we got to be extra careful right now who we
Mhm,
trust and whose information we believe in general, right? It's like just like the
mhm,
news. Like it's so easy to manipulate people that are
mhm.
in fear.
Hey, Jess, come over to YouTube, Natasha Edwina YouTube, because the sound is not working on Instagram, but I guess we could stop the video now,
I was
but
just gonna
yeah,
say, should
we
we
might,
go off the
might as well, because we don't want to, it doesn't sound like the sound is going to come back. I guess we could have always restarted it on Instagram too. Um, yeah, I even had like a weird little, exclamation point to your video too. So I'm
Oh,
not
it
sure.
did?
Yeah, like I'm not sure what that was
I
all about. I've
wonder if I
never had that
did
happen
something
before.
with the phone when
I
we
don't.
were trying to hook it up to the computer. I don't know.
I'll when I rewatch the video, I'll see if it sounded like they could hear you in the beginning, or maybe nobody said anything. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh,
But I hope some folks are still with us on YouTube. Okay, so what you're saying is right now, a lot of these predatory kind of spiritual folks are using can't that now is an opportune time for them to use these uncertain conditions to scoop up devotees to exploit. What are some of the ways that they exploit? Obviously, money is one, taking their money, come be my
sex.
student. Sex, yeah. Well, John of God, you heard about all that, right?
Like horrible, right? This is just horrible. So many people like trusted
Mm-hmm.
him and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I feel like there's less authentic spiritual teachers than there are manipulators and people that are just totally off their rocker. Like, it's so hard to find people that are really authentic, even psychics. Like, I see the manipulation there so
Mm-hmm.
much, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I know what's better for you than you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it keeps the person hooked and creates this like so this is a benefit is it creates a codependent relationship, which
Mm.
then, the person keeps pouring money into
Yeah,
this
they have to keep
person.
going back.
Yeah, but it creates a level of codependency because they're like, "Oh my gosh, this person is healing me," or "This person knows what's best for me," or "This person has the answers." And so it really plays into that um insecurity, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, even with the work that you and I are both very intuitive, but we're also trained therapists in ethics, and have licensing boards watching our behavior and all of that. Not that that's the reason that we do it. We're both
Right.
authentic and high integrity people, but even if I'm using my intuition or I'm doing a card reading or whatever else, I said, this is just what's coming through me right now. kind of take it or leave it. See, you're the ultimate expert. And even with everything that's going on right now, I have certain spiritual teachers or mentors or whatever that I follow, but they're a human being. As long as you're a human
Mhm.
being, you're a flawed person and you don't know ultimate truth. So you can, take everything with a grain of salt and bounce it off of your own inner knowing of what's right for you. And I think it takes, like you said, the trauma healing, and it takes time to begin to trust your body, to trust yourself again, and especially if you've already dealt with sexual abuse or physical abuse, because that your body numbs. You start to dissociate that easily without even realizing that you're gone. And it takes a long time for that body to warm up again and to be aware of those signals, I think.
Yeah, and like you were saying, like you get that these people are just human. I think
Hmm.
a lot of people enter these spiritual communities and they God complex the leaders of them
Mm-hmm.
right away. And so when you God complex anybody, it's like you lose your power immediately. And so when the leader or teacher also claims to have all the answers, they're fitting that mold that you're putting them in, and the puzzle pieces just fit together so perfectly. And then you're just such an easy target to be controlled. So you've got to be really mindful that these people they're not enlightened, they're not God, they're not
Hmm.
the end all be all. They're human. They may have
Hmm.
some answers for you, but you've got to like spread your wings and like not allow yourself to get indoctrinated like with one person's philosophy that you become dependent on
Hmm.
for your life, right? To be able to live life.
Well, even with therapy, I use multiple perspectives. I don't use
Mhm.
I it's an integrative approach, but I rely a lot on Bowen family systems theory. I rely a lot on postmodernism. I rely on, my training at the Center for Mind Body Medicine, the psychoneuroimmunology perspective, nutrition perspective, astrological perspective. I'm all these interlocking perspectives, and I share with my clients my assessment based on each one of those, and then I say, well, here's, what do you think, what's going on
Mhm.
inside of you. And I feel like if we're always guiding people back to their own intuition, that's one way to spot a high integrity healer. Is, are they putting you as the expert? Are they recognizing your own body autonomy? Are they, or are they putting themselves as the hero, the expert, the wise one that has to be followed? And I feel like it's more often than not these male coaches or male
Mhm.
leaders that are so quick to start barking orders or even call out coaching. Like they can be quite aggressive. Even Landmark, I went to a Landmark thing in the beginning. A lot of my friends were going there like, you have to do this, and I'm like, I'm not called to doing it. I don't. And then I finally went because my very dear friend kept asking me to go, and it wasn't a bad experience, but I'm like, I will never participate in something like this because it's so against my whole style. I don't like that kind of poke and shock and call you out, and it's just so not trauma informed, right? It's the opposite of trauma informed.
The exact opposite of trauma
Hmm.
informed. And I just want to go back to what you were saying about teachers that empower you, because you got to be careful, because I had one spiritual teacher, she would tell you to trust your own information, but then on the other hand, she would be saying what you're getting isn't right. And so it was like, and that, oh no, it's not exactly that, it's this. So like trust yourself, but I know better. So like there's this, the manipulation runs so deep, the words and the actions are like totally different. So there's so many like fine lines that you have to read and be aware of when you're involved in these kind of spiritual communities. And like Landmark, it's so indoctrinating, right? It's like,
Hmm.
and then you're supposed to bring other people in. That's another
Hmm.
sign. It's like when
Hmm.
you're constantly having or
True.
required or encouraged to bring other people in, right?
Hmm. and
That's a red flag.
And even my dear sweet friend that invited me to the original seminar, she said, they're going to be calling you like every day, but just you don't ignore the phone calls. And I was like, what is that about? Like, you're just going to harass somebody by the phone until they finally like pick up and
Well, they
acquiesce?
break you down. Yeah, they break you
Exactly.
down. And that's what a lot of them do is they want to break you down and they get to know your weaknesses because you're exposing them right away in a lot of these
Hmm.
places, right? Because it's like so encouraged to share and be vulnerable, but then they know your weaknesses and they play
Hmm.
on that. It's like,
Hmm.
"Oh, you're just too scared to do this and it'll
Mm.
really help you."
Hmm.
And then you're like, "Oh, am I? Is that what it is? Is that what's going on? Maybe they're right and I'm
Hmm.
wrong, you know?"
Probably not unlike the military. I mean, there's reasons why they do certain things in boot camp. They need that indoctrination off on the battlefield maybe to have the cohesiveness to stay safe or whatever else. But
Mhm.
there is psychological trauma that comes from that too.
Absolutely, because you have to give away your own knowingness and allow somebody else to really lead you, and a lot of times it's in blind faith, like, you don't
Hmm.
even know these people,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Scary.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you about something else too. I can't remember what organization, and I'm not trying to like call out certain organizations and put them on the hot spot, just coming up with some of these experiences that I've had that just made me feel uneasy or like I didn't want to participate. And I'm not saying that Landmark was sexually abusing people or exploiting them. I just did not like
Oh.
their methods. The methods that they were using are often synonymous with these other like super probably predatory places, because a lot of people that went through Landmark found a lot of value from it, but I just could recognize right away it was not my style, and there's other ways for me to do my personal development. Plus, not only that, but at the time that my friend was trying to recruit me, I'm like, I'd already been through chapters and chapters of personal growth, and it felt like going backwards. It felt like that would have been kind of more like a starting point. But
Mhm.
but yeah, so recognizing some of that stuff, recognizing if somebody's trying to beat you down or trying to look for your vulnerable spots, if somebody's trying to call you out. And there's something about, you know, getting like pushing outside of your comfort zone, but it shouldn't be so far out that you're feeling completely vulnerable. And I know that going back to the spiritual community here in Southern California, there's a lot of spiritual folks who are putting on even these sexuality workshops, and they're not clinicians, and they're, you and I, to get licensed, went through years and years of supervised training. And it's not a it doesn't happen in a weekend. It doesn't happen by studying ethics in a book. It's you go through these very complex human situations of vulnerability with a seasoned supervisor to start to understand how to hold space for someone in a very vulnerable position. And then you have these folks doing workshops that don't really understand that, and they can do some really big harm, um, because sexuality is a vulnerable area. Or going into somebody's trauma is a vulnerable area.
Oh, yeah, I
Anytime
went to
there's
this
surgery.
like tantra workshop, I'll never forget when I was living on the East Coast, and she had men and women at the workshop together, and there was like no trust building activities. And right away, you were sitting with the opposite sex and just like running your hands like over the person's body. And I was like, hell no.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not doing that. And she was like, well,
Hmm.
this is probably like where you're limited. And I'm like, no, this is not safe, actually. Like, you can't just have some random person touch me and expect that that's okay. And yeah, I do actually have trauma, and that's why it's not okay.
Yeah,
Like,
you
that's
know
this is
now.
not. Yeah, and it was like encouraged to just push through those feelings of
Oh
being
gosh.
uncomfortable, you
Oh
know?
no.
That's what a lot of these places are doing. It's like, just move through. This is how you're going to heal by just.
Mm,
It's like, no, that's not how we heal by pushing ourselves off a cliff. We
mm,
heal by like being in a safe space and like
mhm,
starting to look at what needs to be healed in a safe
Mm-hmm.
way, not by just like, just push yourself off the cliff, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, you might get past it, but you're not really doing it in a way that's safe or integrated, right?
Yeah. You reminded me what I was going to ask you about before, or comment on, is when that's another, probably a red flag, is when they start using your natural intuition as they're saying, oh, that's just your shadow side, or that's what needs to be healed. And I've been seeing that, hearing that a lot. And I just heard it like an hour ago, before we got on this video, of, oh, you're projecting your narcissism onto that person. That's your unhealed narcissism that you don't want to deal with. Of course, it's always coming from non-clinicians and people that have
Right.
no experience truly being in a relationship with a true narcissist, or working with somebody that's been through the devastation of being with a narcissist. And that really bugs me when
Sorry, I'm just fixing
oh,
my light. It's
no,
like
that's all
so
right.
bright, and I'm gonna go blind in a minute.
But when folks don't really understand the personality disorder, how incredibly um, sociopathic it can be, and then they're saying, "Oh no, that's just your projection." Or if you call somebody out for their behavior, and they're like, "Oh, that's just your projection onto me," that's this spiritual bypassing. Really, another way of spiritual bypassing, but it's gaslighting.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
100%. And that's like one of the biggest tactics, that they
Mm-hmm.
use, because it is really confusing for somebody, again, that doesn't trust himself, right?
Mm-hmm. I was in a yoga nidra. I guess it was a yoga nidra workshop, but I didn't know what kind of yoga it was going to be. And I was going through a lot of stress, and it was at my church, actually, at the time. This a long time ago. And the female yoga instructor was like, had us get into this really awkward position, and we had to do these like nostril breaths in and out really fast through our nose for several minutes, to the point where we're like snotting, and it was painful and burning. And she's like, whatever anger you feel that towards me, that's just your own anger that's coming up. And I was like thinking to myself, no, bitch, like, I'm
Yeah, I hate
right
you
now
right now.
because I am so stressed, and I just wanted to come to like a relaxing kind of lay back, do some stretches, sound bowls. And you did not properly give me informed consent that I would be here with my nostrils burning and whatever else. And like, not even telling us the agenda. And to this day, I still think of that experience. Like, I feel like there's still some anger, like you're saying, there's no trust. There's that distrust, and the trust wasn't established by giving the informed consent, telling people what's going to happen, that sort of thing, and just surprising them with this technique, and then putting it on the participant, if they're not enjoying the experience or finding value in the experience. And I honestly did not find any value in that experience, except for trusting myself.
Yeah, which is like often what we hope to get out of it. Like, that's the
Mm-hmm.
only good thing that can come out of this experience, is going, oh,
Mm-hmm.
wow, like I watched myself get manipulated, and now I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to watch myself move out of it. Right. I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, that was like some of the healing that I went through, because I had the same thing happen in my family of origin, where it was like I was being abused and no one was believing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in these spiritual communities, it was like, wait, no, this isn't right. And everyone else was like, what are you talking about? Like, you're wrong. And me finally getting to the point, after going through this pattern enough times, to be like, no, like, I know what I'm saying. I know what I'm seeing. Like, I know what I feel. And like, I'm going to stand up for that. And that was for me like a huge part of my trauma healing. And now I'm almost like, I just don't want to get involved with anything that has like group thinking. I'm like, it's a no for me now. It's a no. Like, I'm not doing group stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that is a red flag for me too, as well. If you don't give me the space to be my own individual person and do it my way, that's a red flag for me.
100%.
And again,
100%.
trauma informed work, right? And so, yeah, there's that. And then, um, I also, when I was advertising the show, had talked about stories, because I know you have some stories. I don't know if you're wanting to tell any of those stories about some examples or things that you've experienced yourself, or maybe some of your clients have experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple. Well, I could say for myself, the biggest one was I was part of this spiritual community when I lived back east, and it was, you know, based on energy healing and channeling and all this stuff. And the leader had all the information, and she was helping everybody else get to the level where they could have the information intuitively that she was getting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she was really helping people in a lot of ways, but also she made a shit ton of money by like all the people that were coming through. And when I was leaving, I was like, listen, like, I'm really concerned. There's people with trauma here, and like, it's not getting addressed. Like, this person actually needs a mental health professional. This is beyond what spiritual healing could do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this person has bipolar disorder, or I'm seeing that this person is having like psychosis. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we need to. And she was like, no, those are just beings speaking through you. This is not true. Like, trust me. Like, I know what I'm doing. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no, you don't know what you're doing. Like, I'm actually the one that has the mental health background. And it just like, I just kept getting put down, put down, put down. And everybody idolized this person so much that like her self-proclaimed enlightenment was more trusted than my master's degree of like what was going on. And I'm just like, this is crazy making, you know? And then when I left, like, I became the back person. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a really hard experience, but also a really healing experience. And what I see with most of my clients is in the coaching industry or the personal development industry online, with people being sold huge programs and stuff. And then they are being taught methods to actually manipulate people by playing on their fears. And when they call out these leaders, it's the same thing. It's like, no, this is a you problem. This isn't a me problem. There's like zero responsibility. And so this is running rampant in the personal development online coaching space as well. It's the same kind of tactics and lots of money being made off of them. Lots.
I've heard from some folks that have, friends that have been through some programs with some of these coaches where they initially, found some value, but more so in retrospect, they're like, they were just a really good marketer. They had their charm and their confidence, and they could really market their services. And when they would find out later that that's what their background was, it was marketing, it was selling the dream, selling the illusion. And they really didn't have the interpersonal skills, or the, whether you call it clinical or coaching skills, to help people move through a transformation in an authentic way that feels good for them. And so, they would end up leaving the program or feeling duped or feeling taken advantage of and that sort of thing. But these people are still out there raking in tons of money.
Oh, there's tons of them, and they show the life that people want. That's the
Hmm.
marketing genius, you know? It's like, "Look at my life, look what I'm doing," and
Hmm.
people wanna be that person, right? And so this idolization factor
Hmm.
really is a hook for people, and a lot of these coaches or spiritual teachers, like, talk about it's just about being in my energy. By being in my energy, you're gonna raise your frequency. The
Hmm.
fuck is that shit all about? Like, what? Like, what? And
Hmm.
then people buy into it. They're like, "Ooh, I
Hmm.
wanna be in her energy so I could live her life," you know? And this is what people are buying. Like you're saying, it's smoke and mirrors. There's no
Hmm.
real transformation happening.
Hmm.
It's like it's the whole, like, repeating, "I wanna be part of the popular club," is what's
Hmm.
happening, right? And now
Hmm.
you're paying to be part of the popular club, but you're never really gonna get popular.
Right. That was a little quote that I posted last week, which is, the definition of freedom is the freedom to be unpopular. And so,
Mhm.
to have a different viewpoint and still be validated as you're saying, or to be seen and not to be ousted from community because of that. And then it can feel very lonely, because I think like a lot of people join these cults because they have a fractured family of origin, or they're needing that sense of community, and they felt it for a while until something was not right. I have a friend who was in, actually a couple of friends, I think they're in the same cult. And she was told who she was going to marry. She was forced to marry another person in the cult because it would have been good for the group or whatever else. And that's there were, and her explanation of it was that it was kind of weird at the time, but it was just something that she was into. It was the collaboration of, and there's like very good people in the cult. It wasn't like they weren't sacrificing children or doing all this crazy stuff
Right.
that you hear Christians talk about, and devil worship. It wasn't anything like that, but it was this dangerous groupthink.
Yeah, it really is something to be mindful about, is group thinking of every
Mhm,
kind. I mean, we've been doing that as a society for a long time, and so we're kind of used to giving our power away like that, right? And
mhm,
so being sovereign is a scary place for a lot of people, is getting out of whatever group think they're
mhm,
involved with and really starting to think for yourself is a new concept for a lot of people. And I think right now, during COVID and all this stuff happening, we're being shaken up. And a lot of people are like noticing, like, what do I think? What do I believe? Oh, what does my mom believe? What does my neighbor believe? What does this person on Facebook believe? A lot
mhm,
of people, I think, are starting to see, oh, I can't actually trust myself. I don't know what I believe for myself. And
mhm.
so I'm hoping that, all this shaking up of what's going on the planet is actually going to start to reveal our trauma more so that it's up and we could heal it.
Mhm. I think so. I think, and even now as we speak, we're just moving out of a full moon that I read, from, I think it's Dr. Lennox, is that his name? He's Red Robe Astrology. I just recently started watching his little short daily videos, but he said that this is the most intense, important full moon of our lifetime.
The
Because
one
there's,
that just passed?
yes, the one that where we were both snuggled up in bed sleeping, not together,
Wow.
but
I'm like,
yeah.
wow.
We were both yeah, we were both saying that, oh, all we wanted to do was sleep and be tired
I
and all
was
of this stuff.
sick
Mhm,
during this full moon. I was like, what is going on? Like
mhm.
everything. But like I feel like it's all coming up?
Right. Yeah. It was. I actually felt a bit nauseous too during it, which is very strange for me. I almost never feel nauseous. And even today, I have some dark circles under my eyes. It's like detox stuff. It's energetically, it's pushing through our own physical body, but also the collective right now. And then, of course, elections tomorrow. Like, you can't make this stuff up, the timing. And then
No.
Mercury, I think, goes direct tomorrow as well. So it's just like all of this
Wow.
real, shifting energy and whatnot. But yeah, I think there's a lot that's coming up to be revealed. And one thing that I guess not super surprised about, but um, that I was feeling good about is when we did first go into quarantine and I was spending more time with my children and,
Mhm.
naturally, because we couldn't go anywhere, I realized we actually have such a good, healthy foundation. There weren't that many cracks in our foundation. And that was
Right.
one of those positive discoveries, like, oh, wow, the yelling or the snapping at each other or that stuff that happened pretty much stopped when we weren't being forced to rush around like crazy people in the daily grind, running this one here and that one there and dropping to this parent and then back to this parent and all of that stuff. And now that that's slowed down and isn't really happening anymore, we're so peaceful and loving and can kind of move at our own rhythms and get enough rest and work when we feel like working and eat when we feel like eating, and not having to be on somebody else's schedule. And obviously
I
there's
love that.
value in both ways, but I've told you before, I think I have a Caribbean soul, so like I just
Me
like
too.
I like to be in places where you go with the flow rather than the the
Me
structure.
too. I
Yeah.
think it's so much better for the kids to get to like know their own body and know their own rhythm and know
Hmm.
what actually feels good for them and know what doesn't feel good for them because we take that away. Like it's such a young age.
Hmm. And the collaboration too. My daughter is a Leo and she's got a lot of fire and she's an early riser. She just like up and ready to go. And so she gets things going. She opens up the blinds. She'll, get some hot lemon water going. My son and I are Tauruses. We're kind of lazy and like to, it takes a little bit of a push and momentum to get us going. I shouldn't say lazy, but we're slow risers. It's,
I'm
we're,
slow too.
yeah, we're like,
So slow.
takes us a while to get here. Once we're comfortable, it takes us a while to move to the next thing. The transitions aren't so great, but
Yep.
once we're rolling and won't stop. But yeah, so we'll sleep in, and it's just nice to have the different members of a family or of a society doing your own different things. And if we're all doing everything the same or thinking the same way, that's just not a very productive society.
No, because
We
we
need
all
to.
have our own zones of genius,
Hmm.
that we should get to live in it. We shouldn't be told like how
Hmm.
we need to be in order to be successful because there's so many different ways to define success. And bringing it
Hmm.
back to cults, it's like you have to be this way, you have to do these things. Religion, same thing, right?
Hmm.
In order to be successful, in order to go to heaven or whatever it is, this is how you have to do it instead of like letting people discover who they are and what feels good for them.
Right. And then you become a tool, you know, and they call it narcissistic supply. You're just, your energy is being harvested for someone else. And on some like very low level, this could be a big corporation, right? Where the people at the bottom are the worker bees and they're not really getting to do much. They're not getting much benefit, maybe just a small paycheck from the company. The CEO is getting wealthy,
Right.
that sort of thing, but they're in it because they get the consistency, maybe the benefits, whatever else. But yeah, and then if you're in a cult or you're in a abusive family situation, you're only there to be of service to the predator, the narcissist, the sociopath, the psychopath, whatever they
Mhm.
need. They need some image or publicity. They're, if you have a talent, you'll help them with that. You can, they need sex, you're going to be their sex doll. They need
I saw
whatever.
in the Nexium cult, they bought him his own private island. He like indoctrinated, who was it? It was like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but some big corporation's granddaughters who were like heiresses and they like bought him an island. So like yeah, whatever he needed, they bought it. It was just unbelievable. You got to watch this.
Is this
Mind
the,
blowing.
is it called, it's like, it's called,
Seduced is the,
oh, it's called
but then
Seduce.
there's, yeah, there's
There's a
seduced, but then
4-part
there's,
series.
I saw that one too, but there's also one documentary about the mom that ended up breaking up the whole cult to save her daughter. That
Okay.
one
I don't know much about it. In fact, I hadn't even heard of it until this week. I just happened to see somebody post about it. And so I started to watch the first episode, and one of the guys that was in it was a producer of the show What the Bleep Do We Know? And so
oh,
yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then he left after a number of years because he just felt like there were some, not so good things happening. So I was just at the part where they were kind of showing how they introduce people and how they get you hooked in, but I never got to like some of the abuses or the things that they were
and
doing.
this was like landmark. Like it was like when you
Yeah,
hear the mom
that's
tell
what I
the story.
felt like. Yeah.
Yeah, beyond the headlines, escaping the Nexium cult with Gretchen Carlson.
Okay.
That's on Hulu.
Okay.
Um, I'm gonna have to go in a few. I'm like fading with the times and
Yeah. Yeah.
everything. I'm
No
like, I can't
worries.
even think straight anymore.
Yeah. It's been a long day.
Um, yeah, but that was really interesting, and thank God, like the mom was relentless about
Yeah.
getting her daughter out of it, and she exposed the whole thing.
Wow, that's amazing. That's sort of like becoming R. Kelly? Did you watch that?
No,
Oh
is that
gosh.
good?
It's pretty, it's terrifying, but it's also, as a psychologist, you're going to,
Interesting.
yeah, you're going to be fascinated because it so accurately describes the psychopathic personality and just his manipulation, the grooming, the way that he groomed his victims. And then he eventually had these young teenage girls living in this mansion, but like tied up, like locked into their each of their rooms and only having like a bucket to pee or
Oh my
poo
gosh.
in a mansion. And they couldn't come out, but he didn't even have to lock them up anymore because they were so used to the way that things were.
Oh, that is so creepy.
And he'd be, using them for group sex and all of these things. And so it was, and then same thing, like these parents would let their teenage daughters go with him because he promised he would make them famous. And of course he had the clout, and so they would go, but then they would get so indoctrinated into his manipulation and psychological abuse that the parents could not even save their daughters. They could not, they would have these, they would finally like get her on the phone, or they'd finally like know what hotel they were staying at or whatever. And she wouldn't go with them. She wouldn't leave.
Oh my gosh.
It was just heartbreaking. And so in the documentary, which came out, I think 2 years ago, maybe, some of the girls had been rescued and they had gotten out, but there was still some that were there. So I don't know what's going on now. And of course, he also evaded the law. Like he evaded, I think he did spend maybe a little bit of time in jail, but how is he able to get away with the stuff? It's the enablers, it's the handlers, it's the flying monkeys, it's the people that are, for whatever reason, protecting, these figures. And so I feel like everybody has to be on alert. It's not only the victim, but the friends of the victim, the parents of the victim, like
100%.
everybody has to say something, see something, say something kind of deal.
Yes.
Like going back to what you were saying when you were in that conference and you're like, everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid. Oh my gosh, what's going on? So if you're that person, you have to speak up.
You have to. You have to.
Well, thank you so much for your wealth of information. And I do want to let people know that are watching this that you offer a trauma certification. So much of your work now is teaching people how to be trauma informed, and clinicians and non-clinicians, which, as I was just talking about, there's people that don't have that training and they really need, if they're going to be doing any kind of work with the public, to understand how to be trauma informed so they're not inadvertently doing these things that trigger people or make them feel unsafe.
Absolutely. 1,000,000%. It's so important to at least be trauma informed, like not to be trauma certified, if that you're not called to work with trauma, but at least be trauma informed so you're not hurting people.
Yeah. So how can they get a hold of you if they're interested in that work that you do? And you also have a wonderful Facebook and Instagram page. I have to say, you put out a lot of empowering things, and you can tell that you're very much in touch with your power and that confidence and speaking up even against, unpopular notions now, which I very much admire.
Thank you so much for that. So my website is www.safetraumahealing.com. And then it's just Melissa Lapides on Facebook, and it's Safe Trauma Healing on Instagram. And yes, I do like to speak up. And my friend told me this quote today. She said, oh, what was it? It was so good. She got from somewhere else. Like, I forget what it was, but it was something about like little girls who couldn't speak up become women that can, And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's good.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Yeah, I'm your sister on that path. I will always be speaking up for the voiceless, and I will be the sacrificial lamb. If somebody wants to give me a couple punches, I'll say what needs to be said.
Totally.
I get a lot of kickback online, or maybe not so much anymore, but I used to get a lot. Maybe I'm just getting better at just ignoring it.
Or like just once you don't care, it seems to like not come as hard,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. It doesn't come as much.
I got
So
my haters too, though.
everybody does. It's like a level of professional success, right?
Guess
You have,
so.
yeah, you
Mhm.
get some haters. So yeah, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on, and I hope that everyone that's watching found some value. If you have any questions, contact me, contact Melissa, let us know, and we can direct you where you need to go.
Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Good night, everyone.